All right, here we are. Our very first episode of another round. Very excited. I'm Matt, the Pickled Dragon, formerly of the Pickled Dragon Unscripted, which fell into decay, but now we are here, bigger and better than ever. And with my new co-host, Ari. Am I pointing in the right direction? Yes. Yeah. Oh, it might be in different places depending on who's recording what. Ari, on mine, it's over here. So Ari, I'm gonna swing it over to you.
Hi, I'm Ari. I am the owner and creator of Vecna's Laboratory. I'm so excited to go on this journey and learn a little bit more about the gaming culture. Oh wait, that was weird, but whatever.
Yeah, that was fine. We're all good here. And we're really excited because we have amazing ladies with us tonight. Tanya the Warmistress, who brings the hammer down, playing Warhammer. The Warhammer down. Yeah. And Dark Elf Erin, Dark Elf Girl, I should say, because that's the official title. The Dark Elf Girl, who is a D&D gamer and miniature painter extraordinaire. Both ladies are extraordinary at miniature painting, but yeah, we'll get into that a bit later too. So without further ado, we're going to talk tonight a bit about the journey these two ladies have taken in their different gaming genres, and as well as just not only in gaming, but in the painting and just interacting in the community in general. So without further ado, let's get the ball rolling. Let's have the two special guests, very special people, introduce themselves. Tanya?
All right. So I'm Tanya. I am a wargamer, specifically with Warhammer 40K. I do play a little bit of Age of Sigmar, and occasionally I'll dabble with things like Frostgrave and things like that. But my main love is Warhammer 40K. And I originally just started painting. I painted for, well, from about 2013 to 2019. And then when I got hurt playing roller derby and I got the diagnosis I wasn't ever going to be able to play roller derby again, then I decided that I was going to take the plunge into playing Warhammer 40K regularly and sort of stepping out into the community at large to share my my Warhammer journey, so to speak. And now I am a podcaster. I am a co-host on the biggest Warhammer 40K podcast that exists, and one of the longest running ones as well, which is Forge the Narrative. I Twitch stream on 2 different channels. I have an Instagram account. I write for goonhammer.com, and I just really am very passionate about Warhammer 40K, painting miniatures, playing the game, and I'm just really happy to be here. So thanks for having me.
Wow. That is going to be a tough act to follow, Erin. But I know that you can live up to it. I know that you can live up to it because the insane talent that you possess is
yeah, hi, I'm Erin, also known as Dark Elf Girl. I think my main hub is D&D and Instagram, if that makes sense. I pretty much just play D&D. I paint miniatures from any game, like whatever strikes my fancy, but as of right now, it's just Dungeons and Dragons, which is how I got into the miniature painting, as I think many people do. I also really like to craft and make dioramas and stuff, but yeah, and then on Instagram, I do live streams, and I also run a monthly painting competition that's been going on for almost a year and a half now, and it's kind of it's my baby. It's my passion, and I really love doing it. I do also stream on Twitch on occasion. I haven't been doing it a lot lately, but I do. Oh, and I do commission painting as well. So, yeah.
What is the name of your painting competition?
It's called the Dark Elf Dare. Basically the idea is that we're daring you to try something new and kind of push yourself a little bit. And I just started it to sort of contribute to this amazing community that we have on Instagram, full of like all the different aspects of the hobby. yeah, I just wanted to do something that would, yeah, inspire people, create community. And then it also in turn inspires me and makes me feel more like part of the community. Yeah, we, you know, have anywhere between 30 and 60 entries every month. Lots of different businesses in the hobby are sponsors. So it's really great promotion kind of for them too, and have them sort of immerse in the community more. And yeah, I just really I love doing it.
Awesome. Oh, that is amazing. Both of you guys, you know, when we first talked about doing the show, you were two of the first people we thought of. And Erin, you have really put yourself out there in terms of building that community, and the thing that we're really focused on is building culture around gaming. And you have teamed up with some other really big voices in that Instagram community to create kind of a welcoming place where people could connect. I think is the best way I could describe it. You've got frequent stories on Instagram where I wake up every morning and there's like 80 stories running from Erin.
It's true.
Time to start the day.
Yes, and then you roll through them all. Yeah. So
I mean, not to digress real quick, but I will say that ties into the community thing for me, is because that's part of how I found community within the community, and I want other people to find that too, if they want that, if that's something that they need in their life. So, and part of that, me talking to my stories, is that I have people to talk to during, you know, lockdown, living alone and all that. Like there was always somebody I could talk to. And the thing with the stories is like, sure, I'm talking to my phone, but there's something about that, like nobody has to listen to me if they don't want to, but I still get to be, you know. And then in turn, I found out that it actually was a positive thing for people, and they really liked it and encouraged them to sort of open up more too. So yeah, that's why I do that.
And speaking of putting yourself out there, Tanya, you have certainly jumped into the deep end of Warhammer. We'll get to that. We'll definitely get to that. So one of the things Ari and I talked about earlier was, you know, how do we look at, you know, a journey that a woman might take into gaming, whether it's D&D or Warhammer or any board game or anything out there. And my mind immediately went to, you know, why don't we look at where everything kind of started, right? And I had shared an article with you guys, and it was a 40-year-old article from the old The Dragon magazine, Dragon number 39. And let me just share the screen real quick. Hopefully this will work. Can everyone see it?
Yep.
Yeah.
There it is. Women want equality, and why not? So this has obviously been an issue, been talked about for quite a long time, you know, and I think some people would say that things haven't really changed much. And some people would say, I think, Erin, you're one of them, that things have changed dramatically. And if anyone wants to have a read, this is Dragon number 39, or back then it was The Dragon. So you gotta get it right. But this particular article is interesting because the first page alone talks about different women's experiences, and it's both, they highlight a number of kind of bad experiences where you know, one woman talks about her character, she was a cleric who became pregnant, and the DM said, oh no, you can't do that, you know, that you're a lawful good cleric, you can't be pregnant. And he essentially she ended up having to make a new character. And then there were women who were kind of coerced by their male counterparts to, it says here, was forced by the males in the party to seduce a small band of dwarves so the party could get the drop on them and kill them. You know, just stupid things like that. And these were all letters that had been sent in to the Dragon back in the day, where they talk about their experiences. And by the way, this article is written by Gene Wells and Kim Mohan of the old TSR Guard. But there are female players who wrote in and said, I've never had a problem. I've always had a great time. And so, I mean, there's been both good and bad. So when looking back at these issues, I think it's kind of a neat thing to be able to look back and say, you know, this is where we got our start, and kind of try to decide, have things changed? And we're not really talking from a rule standpoint, right? Because obviously the rules have had a massive overhaul since, you know, 1978, 79 in terms of D&D. Well, in any game, probably, you know, if Warhammer were around in the 60s or 70s, I'm sure it would be a completely different animal today, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
In
terms of Warhammer, the main sort of argument right now is that like there's not very good female representation in like the miniature line, but particularly there seems to be contention over the fact that, quote, women can't be Space Marines. Space Marines are like the flagship faction. They are what the entire company is sort of based around. They have a Space Marine outside of their headquarters that like tourists come to take pictures of. And a lot of the problems that we have, first off, they're mostly in the online space, but they're all mostly triggered by when people make female Space Marines. And when we talk about going back to the very beginning, in the very beginning of Warhammer, you used to get blister packs of Space Marines. And in the 80s, those blister packs used to have women Space Marines in them, but those blister packs didn't sell very well. So they stopped making female Space Marines, and then they made the lore to sort of fit that. So I think that in terms of like women's representation in the hobby, in terms of like the miniatures, I think that the company itself has always sort of toyed with that, but the culture surrounding the game itself just decided back then that they didn't want it, and women didn't really play back then, so they didn't sell miniatures. Has it come a long way since then? I think it has, but I'm sure that we'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit.
Yeah, I'm interested in, you know, TSR has gotten a lot of knocks because it was said that they just didn't market to women as well as they could have. Mm-hmm. And certainly there are a number of articles, or I should say advertisements, that were geared towards women. You know, I actually just stumbled across one today, and the title, and it's an advertisement, but let me just share the screen. And again, this is old. This is from like 1978, I think. I could be wrong. It might be 77. But why women don't play war games, right? And it's interesting because remember that D&D was designed by Gary Gygax and company, Dave Arneson, who got their start in war games, right? And so when they say, why don't women play war games? I'm wondering if they are mixing the two up, because if you notice the books that are shown here in this advertisement are the old books that were originally released in 1976. This is before Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, before Basic Dungeons and Dragons. This is like the original set. And prior to this, it was Chainmail, which is basically just a war game, right? And a lot of the rules were based on war games. And so I'm wondering if they mix up the two. But here you could see where they mention it's a game which women play and enjoy equally with men, and here's why. And I think that they're trying to say, hey, you can enjoy war games because you get to play as this character, right? Which is kind of, you know, mixing the two up, I would say, but I think the meaning is there. I think it's interesting. But is this an effective advertisement for women or for anybody for that matter? But you know, it was so new back in the day, it's hard to say, you know.
The time period alone kind of speaks volumes. Like we've come quite a long ways as far as like equalizing women in general since the 70s. But also marketing and advertisement has always been very gender specific, like especially with toys. I mean, extremely so. Girls play with pink dolls and boys play with army men and G.I. Joes. So
except Lego.
Except for Lego. Yeah, but there's been a very strong, I mean, especially in the 80s, you really like, I've watched a lot of things about the ads and like toys and stuff of the 80s and how like really specifically that was. And I think that's, as far as like Warhammer, it's a bit of both, right? Like, it's like they tried, but they weren't selling. So of course they're just going to push the thing that sells more. And then it like came into the mind that that's like how it is. Like, this is what people want. And it's maybe not necessarily, it's not so.
I think with new companies, you really want to make sure that you're spending your advertising money smartly. You want to make sure that you're reaching your target demographic and the people who are like more guaranteed to buy your products. So like in a way, I think you can't fault companies at the start for not spending those dollars on like unknown markets, if that makes sense. So I do understand, like, for me with wargaming, I feel like it's a little bit different than Dungeons and Dragons, right? For almost all of my girlfriends want to play Dungeons and Dragons, right? Like when I was on my roller derby team, like if I asked them, hey, are you ever interested in playing Dungeons and Dragons? Almost all of them would say yes, right? But if I asked, and I asked literally every person on my team, would you like to come and play a war game with me? Nobody was interested. Nobody wanted to come and play with me, a woman, this game that I love, right? So I do think that there is something in there that I just don't know if Warhammer ever will appeal to like a majority of women. But at the same time, maybe they just haven't, maybe they literally just haven't been exposed to it, so they don't know what Warhammer is, right? Whereas now with like Critical Role and stuff, almost everybody knows what Dungeons and Dragons is. So,
well, I think the basis of D&D is this, for me, it's a cooperative game where you get to play fantasy. Like, I think traditionally women, we like to play fantasy and play like make believe and all that stuff. And the cooperative side, I think women can tend to work really well together. Like all of these things are makes sense to me why it's kind of more gender neutral, at least now. Whereas Warhammer, yeah, I mean, to be honest, I'm not a competitive person. I'm not drawn to playing one-on-one. And I am very exposed to the game and I'm still like, I don't know, you know, but like, yeah. And so I think it could be that it's because I'm a female, or just in general, maybe just the concept doesn't appeal to a lot of people, like as many people.
You know, and that's interesting because, you know, I think that there's definitely, like you mentioned with Critical Role, there's definitely an element to which, you know, somebody can sit down and watch the show and not only have a good time, but they can learn the rules. And I think war games have a reputation, and rightfully so. I mean, they're pretty crunchy in terms of rules. And if to get that kind of exposure that, say, D&D has gotten over the years, I think it would be a little more difficult for a war game, only because of the entertainment factor wouldn't necessarily, it would be more difficult, I think, to pull on. But, you know, and it goes back just to marketing and advertising. And what could be more telling of a group that you're trying to appeal to than like the artwork that you see in the books or on the cover, especially on the covers of the book, which kind of leads me to my next question. I continued sharing because I'm gonna kill that, and I have this one. So this came from the time period 1976. This was the last supplement that came out for that original D&D set. and it caught, at the time, you can imagine it got a lot of scrutiny. Not necessarily for the reasons you might think. It was more like, oh, teenage boys are going to look at this and be corrupted, and it was a completely different group, you know, calling it pornographic and so forth. So, you know, and obviously TSR took a lot of heat for even the, you know, the pulp era of fantasy, you know, the Conan and the cover of the books and so forth that you saw in the 60s and 70s with, you know, the clinging female with no clothes on, and there's Conan with all his muscles bulging out. Well, you know, TSR was mainstream. I shouldn't say mainstream, but they put themselves out there, and they caught a lot of heat in general for that art as, you know, an evil, horrible thing. So my question is, now this particular piece was illustrated by a lady named Deborah Larson. So I'm kind of curious, do you think it matters, just in general, not necessarily like if you want to argue the pros and cons of this being on a cover of book marketed to teenage boys, whatever, but do you think from a standpoint of misogyny or you know, as a woman, do you feel like it matters that this was illustrated by a woman and you know, given to TSR by her to, you know, as an artist? Do you think that matters, or do you think it's still just as? Do you think that people in general would still have a problem with it?
Ooh,
I think for me, I think it's not a problem in this instance, like whether it's on the cover or not. I don't think that that's a problem. I think what becomes a problem is if women throughout the entire book or series of books are portrayed in this particular way, and that's it.
Yeah, and
right? Because she's a victim there.
Right.
And she is an object for us to visualize upon, right? She doesn't really have a lot of agency, and while this is okay in small doses, I think what the problem is with this sort of thing is that there's not I can't really say because I haven't read this, but generally back then there wouldn't have been very much of a diversity with which they would have portrayed women.
Mhm.
You know?
Yeah, I agree with you. I was just thinking of, you're describing basically Frank Frazetta art.
Love
right?
Frank Frazetta.
Yeah.
Me too. And I grew up looking at, my dad had all of these like trading cards and all this stuff. And yeah, so a lot of the imagery is of the muscly man with the like damsel, whatever that he's saving. But there's also women, like powerful warrior women in there too, the Red Sonjas, you know, and stuff. So I think that point is super valid. Like that, as long as there's balance and it's not just this, then I don't really see the issue.
Yeah, a lot of people forget that Conan, Valeria, he kind of reported to her, you know,
Yeah.
in a lot of the books.
Yeah.
So I think that's interesting. That's something that's overlooked, you know, but I just thought it was interesting because the art is as portrayed, you know, and when you talk about the Clyde Caldwell art or the Larry Elmore art that came in the early 80s, you know, there was a lot of the chainmail bikinis and with the men in full plate kind of going on there. It was the kind of the classic. It was the next evolution in that pulp art, I think.
Mm-hmm. It's funny that we talk about Frazetta, because I think that's why Frazetta for me is fine, is because, okay, the women are very scantily clad. However, Conan is also very scantily clad.
Everyone is. Yeah.
Exactly. So
Everyone.
I feel like it was handled in a very equal way, right? The men were just as much objects to be gazed upon as the women were in that case. And I think it just feels better.
Yeah, it's just the human form that we're kind of looking at and idolizing as being, you know, represent. Yeah, I agree.
And that it seems like with Frazetta's art that virtually everybody was scantily clad. It didn't matter who you were, or who, you know, everybody, even the monsters or the bad guys had nothing going on. You know, it's just they were all. I think about the what's this not the it's John Carter series.
Carter and Mars. Yeah.
Yeah. He though that art is there's quite a bit of kind of like, you know, anthropomorphized and, you know, people or animals that aren't even wearing nothing, you know. So, and it's just interesting to me. But
I mean, still like comment on her being a female, an artist, a woman did this painting or whatever it is. My little tidbit on that is that I always have drawn my whole life. I also consider myself a bit of a feminist and always identified as a tomboy. And I always drew scantily clad, very beautiful women. That was like, because I like the female form, you know. So to me, I think maybe I'm just looking at it from a very narrow perspective, but like I didn't feel objectified. And maybe it's different when you're doing it yourself too. It's a little different, you know, like the power is yours.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like, because we actually had a talk, Erin, about your Adeptus Mechanicus lady that you had painted, and she's a tech priest, but her chest is open, exposing her breasts, right? And we were talking about, and I feel like if I'm off on a tangent, stop me, but I feel like we talked about the difference between how the Warhammer community itself reacts to exposed breasts on a miniature, as opposed to how the D&D community reacts to exposed breasts on a miniature. And to me, the fact that there was a difference shows that there's also a difference in the culture surrounding these two games. So I don't know, did you want to like talk about the differences? Because you've painted D&D ladies with exposed breasts before as well.
So that's kind of how it came up, is that I mean, actually, I'll show another example. Here's a pinup style woman, not dressed at all. Also, her posing is very, she's just a beautiful woman, like, who's not wearing clothes. I don't know, she lives in the ocean, why would she wear clothes? But like, yeah, I painted so many things like that, and it's often commented on, like, yeah, their bodies are commented on or whatever, but it's like, it's very cheeky kind of way, but I never get anything inappropriate. There's never any like comments on her actual body parts, like female body parts, I should say, versus just a butt or something. We all have butts. And then the moment the first time I paint something with an exposed breast that is strictly Warhammer miniature, I got tons of comments that at first I was like, okay, cool, you know, but there just ended up being so many. I was like, what is the deal? And it kind of bothered me. So I was like, wow, I'm not inviting that. I'm just painting a miniature. Like, I'm not inviting this to my page by any means. And Tanya kind of pointed out to me that she's like, well, it's a Warhammer mini. I'm like, duh. Like, so duh. Yeah, it's true. I mean, it's a different culture, and there are more men playing it than, you know, whereas I feel like D&D is pretty even, I'd say, almost, in as far as representation within it. But yeah, I was
there was a comment about that very thing in that Dragon magazine article, where one of the ladies who wrote in mentioned that, oh well, you know, she just seemed to feel like every miniature that featured a woman, and this of course is back in 1980, which is probably pretty spot on, but every miniature that featured a woman seemed to have no clothes on, and the guys are, you know, swinging their swords and plate armor, and you know, and she just kind of felt like, I can't remember the exact words that she used, but I have the article in front of me here. So she wrote, some of the downs of D&D for me are in encountering men's collection of fantasy figures. Of course, they were figures back then, whose only females are the naked sirens who serve only as so much booty. And I think that she didn't realize that today that would mean something else. But and for that matter, the cartoons run the Dragon that present the same view, which is interesting, because I think that it's come a long way. If you look at there's a lot of miniature manufacturers out there right now that like Effin' Cool Minis. I don't know if you've ever seen any of their miniatures. They have a line of miniatures that there's a pose with a girl, but they have the exact same pose with a guy. If they're naked, there's one of each. So I think it's kind of come a long way in that regard.
I think so. And I think kind of like Tanya said about just there being representation on both sides. Like it's just in one thing, but it's like now it's both. You know, you can pick, just to prove it. Like here's an elf, she's in full armor, you know, elf gear. She's nothing exposed. But I also like to pick the other kind, you know, like I think as long as there's a nice representation of all things, like let people pick, you know. So
and I feel like for basically the entirety of Warhammer up until extremely recently, the representation of women was not great. And I think that now when online communities start talking about female representation, now we're starting to see very small but very loud pockets of fans of Warhammer are expressing their distaste with how GW is starting to move away from like over-sexualized forms. Like, for example, the old Sisters of Battle had Repentia, which are, back then, they were very scantily clad, and they were in, I mean, the poses were not very dynamic back then, but they felt a little bit more sexualized. And they've really moved it forward with the re-release of the Sisters of Battle. The Repentia are now, they are still scantily clad. However, the clothes that they are wearing are still functional. The women have bound breasts, because obviously they are warrior women and they don't want everything like flying around and all of that. And on top of that, we now see that the Sisters of Battle are quite athletic looking, right? Like they have these giant, they're called eviscerators, these giant chainsaw swords that are longer than they are tall, you know, and they're going in and they're fighting the baddies of the universe. So they have muscles now, which seems fitting in the lore, and there is a very vocal sort of sub-faction of Warhammer fans who are not happy about this. And I don't see that same kind of like visceral sort of like reaction in the D&D community whenever they see like half-orc female barbarian miniature, right? The community in general in D&D accepts that is a thing, but in general, and I will say probably like 95% of Warhammer fans will accept this new Repentia and actually think that they're beautiful models because they are. But there is this sort of like aggression almost towards this new line that Warhammer is starting to take with their female miniatures. So there definitely does seem to be like a difference in the culture between the two sides.
I definitely.
That's kind of interesting, because it seemed like D&D, I feel like, and now I've collected miniatures for decades, and I feel like the turn D&D made the turn miniature wise with female models during the early 2000s.
I have sort of theory on why.
Well, go ahead.
I think, okay, maybe this probably plays into it. A certain age group that started buying that stuff hit the age to buy that stuff, and it's, I'll say, to speak for my age group, I grew up with super strong women in the 80s, like Ripley from Aliens and Sarah Connor with her buff arms and all the women that I idolized growing up. Like, and now I'm the purchaser of that stuff. Of course, it's going to change what they start putting out there. So that's what the interest is. In general, you know, and I to say about D&D, when I first heard about it as a child, and even up until, you know, through a teenage years, it was only boys that played. That's all I knew. It wasn't that wasn't like women couldn't. It was just the boys played it, and I didn't really know much about the game. It just didn't seem interesting to me. But I don't think that it was no girls allowed kind of attitude. It wasn't that at all. It's just how it was. Like, yeah. So that's my thoughts on that.
I think maturity. I think you're absolutely right. I think the players who were teens or even younger in the 80s grew up, you know, and I think and I keep going back to that dragon article, but things that you keep bringing up are in there. There was a lady that wrote in, she said that she does run into problem players, but they're almost all adolescent males who also upset the older males. So it's like could be just a purely mature thing. So this large group of adolescent males who grew up with this stuff and had, like you said, the purchasing power in the early 2000s. They they could appreciate the aesthetic more of the shield maiden as opposed to the damsel, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can say in Warhammer that's the age is not the issue.
I'm sure it sounds like there's a lot going on. We have a lot to talk about that for sure.
No, I meant kind of more D&D on the D&D side. Like
yeah.
Promote their more stuff because they are just inclusive as heck.
So go ahead.
I'm making it sound like Warhammer is this like awful place for women, and I don't want it to sound like that at all, because I have found that like 99% of the people that I come into, probably more than 99% actually, of the people that I come into contact through Warhammer are amazingly kind and wonderful. Mm-hmm. So I don't want to like sell it like that, but at the same time, I'm not sure why Warhammer has this very small, tightly knit group of really angry men. So I don't have the answers there, but at the same time, like the good things about Warhammer like far outweigh whatever this small group of people are actually doing.
From what I've observed, I would
yeah. So I know that everyone here has had good experiences with D&D. Even at Tanya, you've had very limited experience with D&D, but pretty much a good experience from this standpoint, right? Yep. So like with Ari, you were mentioning that you've gamed with your husband and kind of networked that way. Have you or any of you really, have you guys had or does anything stand out as something that you've heard of that in the D&D community that is a problem?
I haven't really experienced any problems with that when I'm playing with my current group, because they're friends and I wouldn't want to play with them if they were like assholes. So generally with that, it's more of I'm more aggressive in the game and so are they. So we're also trying to compete for who could be the most alpha. And a lot of times like men don't like that. Right. Yeah. They're not used to women being aggressive. But other than that, sometimes when I used to play at like game stores, there would be one or two men that no matter what you did, it was like, what are you doing here? Kind of thing. And it's like most of the time the consensus would be like, okay, then leave if you're going to be a jerk about it, kind of thing. And it's like, I think all of us holding each other accountable has helped a lot. Because it really depends on your group. And if everyone's just like complacent and be like, oh, sure, like that's just that guy, let's just let it go. But like, no, like that's not okay. And, this is a very inclusive game. And if you can't play that way, then this group is not for you. Go find your own group that feels that way, kind of thing.
You guys think that it's the DM's job to be the police in that regard? Or is it kind of like everybody's? But the DM is kind of in that position where they're leading the table. So does it fall on them?
I think humans behaving lies on all humans, like behaving, right? But I think it kind of like in a work setting, manager like draws the line on what's acceptable or not. And like they have to do that. Otherwise, like, your coworker can yell all they want about like equality, but if it's not actually being followed through by like management, it doesn't mean anything. So I kind of think that's what the DM has to play. Like they're setting the tone of what is allowed at this table. And
right.
Again, though, I feel like everybody's responsible for maintaining like a happy inclusive place. But I'm glad you said that though. I guess I have a little bit experienced when I play with a group of all guys, the whole kind of getting talked over. That happens to me a lot. And I'm kind of I'm pretty outspoken and loud, and I've been frustrated, I think, multiple times. And I never felt like it was because they were like, she's a woman. It's just kind of almost in their nature to just listen to each other first. And like,
right.
So I wouldn't necessarily call it a negative. It's just one of those things in our culture that's yet to shift fully, you know? So
with Tanya, you know, the experiences at the D&D table are generally where you're going to have the problem. But with you, is it actually during gameplay, or is it usually, because you have things like after battle reports and all these things that tend to have conversations around them when people can be, you know, safely at their keyboards, being their warrior self. Have you had a problem with the 1% at the table, or is it always online after?
I had like one minor problem with, and it was actually somebody on my ITC team who insisted on telling me about how rules worked. And it was actually like all my ITC teammates were playing a 2 versus 2 just for fun, just like a reset or whatever. Because one of our group was like coming back in after like a year break. So we're like, okay, let's just play its new rule set. And one of the guys just insisted on telling me what the rules are. And I kind of just did this and went, right? Because I get that online all the time. And this is the first time that I had really had it like at the table. And my ITC captain is a very empathetic kind of person, and he actually stepped in for me because culture crafting is very important to him. And he basically said, dude, you know she plays the game more than you do. You know she knows the rules better than you do. So you should probably just keep that to yourself, right? So that's the only time that I've really ever sort of experienced something that might have been an assumption based off my gender at the table. But I get it in online. Battle reports are the worst for sure. And after I do battle reports, I usually get DMs about how bad I am at the game.
Wow. I know that I have a bunch of examples.
Oh yeah, I sent you a bunch of examples, didn't I? Oh yeah. Ooh, let's read mean tweets.
You want to read mean tweets? Well, before we go there, you know, I did have one other question for you, and that is, so if the DM is kind of that person who is supposed to kind of mediate the flow of this sort of behavior, would it be the captain, or at these tournaments or at the game table, who is that person? Who is the DM that would say, hey, you know what, is it that person, that captain? Or
yeah, you don't have that option when you're playing Warhammer 40K at a tournament. You have and we always say Warhammer is a cooperative experience because you need each other's help to play this game. So it is you and one other person at the table, and that is it. So it's up to you two to figure it out. And in the cases where somebody is just persistently being a jerk, then you would have a tournament organizer or a judge come over, and they would hand out a yellow or a red card depending on how egregious the infraction was.
And what do those cards represent?
Yellow card is a warning, and red card is a GTFO.
Oh. Hit the road, pal.
There's the door. Right.
Don't let it hit you on the way out.
Wow,
sometimes red cards come with extra sort of like, I guess, bad things. So if it's the TO runs a circuit, sometimes that red card will be like, look, you can't come back for X amount of games. We won't let you back in. It just really sort of depends, because Warhammer tournaments in general are independent. So it would be up to the TO to determine what they would do. But in general, most tournament organizers have a zero tolerance policy for any sexism or racism or transphobia or anything like that. So I would imagine in most cases that those would come with pretty hefty consequences.
Understood.
Do you think there'd be a lot of pushback if there was a set of rules, no matter what, per tournament? You know what I mean? Like if they came out and said, like, we don't allow the sexism or racism in here, instead of leaving it up to individual ones. Like, do you think they'd get a lot of pushback from that?
No, and in fact, we have the ITC, which used to be the independent tournament circuit, but now it is the international tournament circuit. And they basically just compile stats on winners and losers, and then they have like a prize at the end of the year. And they actually have their own code of conduct that outlines what it means to be a good sport at the table, and it outlines exactly what they expect, and being respectful of everybody is part of that code of conduct. And almost all tournament organizers who run ITC tournaments under their sort of, I guess, banner, they almost all of them use that code of conduct. And in that code of conduct, they have actually established what the ITC and Frontline Gaming would do at their big events. They're the biggest events. And most tournament organizers take those guidelines into consideration and do at least that.
Wow. I mean, it seems like you almost have to have that sort of kind of structure, because I could see it seems like bad behavior seems to feed upon itself when it's allowed to get started.
Yeah, it's interesting to me that like we're talking about leaving it in the DM's hands in terms of Dungeons and Dragons, because I think in Warhammer I have a different opinion, and maybe it's because of the one-on-one nature of the game itself, but I think that it is up to everybody to take ownership of their local communities. So if you see something that is making somebody else feel uncomfortable, I think it's up to everybody to step in and be like, hey, something's happening here and we need to talk about it. Right. You don't need to be like, you could be brand new to my community, and if somebody is treating you wrong, or if you think somebody else is treating somebody else wrong, like, then we need to talk about it, right? Like, maybe you don't know that those two guys have been friends for 20 years and that's why they're bantering so hard, right? I have a friend who, if you see us at the game store, you would probably think that we hate each other, but it's actually, we love each other so much that is why we banter this way. But if you come into my game store and you see that it makes you uncomfortable, I will take ownership of that. You take ownership of that. You come to me and we talk about it. And I think for me, it's interesting that you would put all of the onus on the dungeon master. I understand that he sets the world, right? He is like the author.
It just set the tone of their table because it's the game,
right? Yeah,
that's all.
And I say he because I'm looking at Matt. He's been my dungeon master before, so I'm like, Matt, dungeon master. But I wouldn't expect just that to be the dungeon master's responsibility. And I'm sorry, I'm talking so much, but like what if the dungeon master's the problem?
Then I wouldn't play with him, honestly.
And that's
yeah.
I know, and it seems like when a dungeon, at least my experience is, it seems like when a dungeon master is a problem, it always comes back to some sort of inappropriate sexual conduct on the part of one NPC towards a player, or an NPC towards an NPC. And and that was one of the things I was thinking about. For a lot of people, that situation, that being put into a sexual situation is very uncomfortable, but outside of that, I was trying to think, what other situations could a DM put or any game master, or whether it's Dungeons and Dragons or any other game, what kind of situations could someone be put into that probably should be avoided? Whether it's, drug use, or I don't know, because it's like in my games, I've had drug use as part of the game, but I can't say that I ever forced it on a player that I can think of. It's always been like, oh, they kind of make a joke out of it, and then if I choose as the dungeon master for there to be a consequence of drug use, and then is that too far, or is there something else?
I think, to go back to the DM being in charge again, if I said that, that's not what I meant. They do set the tone and the rules for their table, but like I said, as far as humans are concerned, I think we are all responsible for like keeping everyone being cool to each other. They're just kind of the typical tone setter, because maybe the tone of that game is you're like full of banter and like that's what you do, and maybe you don't, you're murder hobos or whatever, and one person in that group might not like that, but maybe that's not their group. Maybe that's not the group for them, so I think that's kind of more what I mean by they set the tone of what it's going to be like. But for me, like nothing has ever come up that's made me uncomfortable, but I think again it's because I've only played with people that are very like-minded friends. I think there's definitely people who play with, they find groups that are strangers, and maybe that's when those scenarios happen more. They're people they don't know, and they haven't found a compatible group. But for me, it's never been a thing, because the DMs are all, like I said, very like-minded, cool people. It's all more fun.
Yeah. I played about 3 times a week during lockdown, so I'm not like unfamiliar with Dungeons and Dragons. And the group that I played with, so they were all, I'm in my middle 30s, and they were all in their early to middle 20s, and they were all guys. And there was a definite like murder hobo kind of like flair to the group, right? And like there were a couple of us who wanted to do other things, right? So we would have talks before the game and be like to the particularly egregious murder hobos, like, hey, can you just just chill out, or like maybe ask for consent before you kill this NPC, because like some of us might need it for something. So like we had a sort of pregame talk before like most sessions, and the pregame talk is also something that is a big deal in competitive Warhammer, or Warhammer in general, rocking up to the table and be like, what are our expectations here? So like if you want to deal with like hard topics or something, is that something that you could do, is like have like a pregame talk to sort of see where everybody's headspace is at?
I think it's a great idea. If you feel it's needed, absolutely.
It's a great idea.
And they just get in and there's never a thing. But yeah, I think there's always that possibility. It's just, again, it's with humans. When you put them together, we're not always going to all want the exact same thing. And there are always going to be those people who are not being considerate of what the group wants. And I've played with those people. They're not bad people. They're just like oblivious to the like co-op side of it. Which is huge thing for me, is why I play. So I left a group that was like that. They were all nice people. I just wasn't vibing with the style of play, and there was like no hard feelings when I left it, so I feel like, but I think pre-game talking is like a great idea, and I don't see why not.
And plus too, I feel like a lot of the times they won't say it to your face, but as soon as they get home, they're like, oh, I was at this table with this woman and she was just taking over everything. Like I feel like 99% of it is online, because they know if they say it to your face, then you're probably going to punch them in the face, so it's like a lot of it, the comments hide behind the computer, because it's so anonymous. And so like, you're not accountable for anything that you say online. They feel like this freedom just to say whatever they want. But I feel like if they were, not a lot of men are really willing to say things. I mean, most I get is like, they're back like shaking, like, whatever. They'll make, kind of gestures at you, being like, oh, this, Like, we get it. Okay. You're not happy. Okay. But, keep your mouth shut, but it's not your turn, and it, I think a lot of it is as soon as they get home, they write this narrative of how they portrayed it, even though it couldn't have gone that way. Who's to tell what the truth is,
And I just, having just moved what, 800 miles to a new home. My wife plays, and we had, so I had to put together a new group. I had my old group for the last 20 years, and everybody was, we had a very great time, and it was really sad breaking up like that. It's one of those things. It was a tearjerker. But when I got here, I was a little nervous because I obviously don't want my wife to have to play with somebody who's going to be a problem, and if she did, it would be the last time that they played with us. But you don't want those experiences. So I had, when I kind of put out the word, I had email after email of people coming at me with, I want to play, which is interesting. That's a whole nother topic of gaming in the South. But I was lucky, I put together a good group, and I remember I hit a point where I was like, I had 4 players, they're all men, and then my wife, and I'm like, that last slot is going to be saved for a woman, because I always felt like, not just somebody that my wife could really, connect with, but I always felt like women brought a different perspective to the table, whereas the guys are often more, and I'm not trying to say that about my group, because I think I got really lucky when we got down here. Like, the people that I put together are amazing. And but I always found that the ladies in general were more interested in character development. And that's not a general rule or a slight against guys. Some guys really enjoy role playing, and in fact, like I said, I'm really lucky about the group we put together because they're all amazing. But I've always felt like the women are much more interested in cultivating the character's personality and the interpersonal relationships than the guys. The guys are more apt to, on a whim, change drastically change the course of their character's personality because it'd be funny, Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think it's really, if you are in a gaming group and it's all guys, and it's always been all guys, I think it would be really, it really helps the game to have those different perspectives. So, but Tanya.
Yes.
I always say Tanya, it's Tanya, right?
You can call me either. People call me both. It's fine.
I've
like
been
them
doing
both
it for years.
Yeah.
So
I like them both.
I'll just bounce between them both.
I love it. Do it.
Okay, so mean tweets. And I went through them, and the images when I brought them up on my computer aren't very good. So I'm not going to share them. I'm just going to read them. Unless you want me to bring them up, I can. They're a little bit grainy because on my computer screen they get brought forward, and I went into Photoshop and I enhanced their resolution a bit. But so this was, as a little background, I think this was like 7 or 8 months ago. This was like, you did a show on YouTube with somebody.
It was probably my first battle report with Play on Tabletop. Yes, on YouTube. Yes.
That's right. Okay.
Yes.
So the first one is, it's a shame that gamer girls look like gamer girls. So as if that has anything to do with anything.
Yes.
And,
Even me.
yeah, it's just being obnoxious for the sake of obnoxious. And anyone that has a booty juice as their name, I think.
I'm so glad that you pointed out the name.
Booty juice.
Booty
right.
juice.
Yeah.
Clearly a source of like, wisdom coming from that one.
So
Yeah.
here's another one. Who painted her army? Don't even tell me she did it herself.
Again, why? What?
And this is a room of 3 women who create masterful and beautiful things. It's just, and then someone responded, my brain cannot comprehend. It's just like, okay, whatever.
Like, that's a personal problem on that they can't comprehend.
Yeah.
Let's see what we got them all. What's next here? Oh, this one I forgot to enhance, so it's really tiny. There's a girl in the game room. The Emperor has forsaken us.
The Emperor forsook you like 10,000 years ago, so get over it.
This one is just plain mean. See what happens when you let them vote.
Oh, wow.
And it's like, and I think about that, it's like, and a lot of these, it's just mean for the sake of being mean. They're trying to be funny.
Yeah.
They're obnoxious. They know they're being obnoxious.
Mm-hmm.
And it really has nothing to do with, one, how well you played, or two, the quality, whether it's the quality of the paint job on your minis or anything like that. Because if they had any constructive criticism, they clearly don't, right?
No.
Right. That's all they have is just being mean because they don't have literally got me. Okay. Like,
yeah.
Great on you.
Yeah.
And here's one where he's dogging on the way you pronounced a word.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know.
Militarum.
Oh, can't even say rum. And that's like supposed to be a fair criticism. No.
Yeah.
And you know what's bad about that one is that that guy was sitting there and like he's got a quibble with this, right? One of those people that use the word quibble, right? And he probably thinks it's a fair. He probably thinks that it is a fair criticism because.
Actually,
exactly.
Pronounce that.
I've been actually so many times in the past 3 years. I'm over it.
Yeah.
Right. Or I get I don't mean to mansplain. And I'm like, don't. Just don't. Stop right there.
But I'm gonna.
Stop. Nobody cares.
Here's another one. Had to bring in a woman to make it fair for Steve. Even then, he almost lost. Good work.
2 points out of 100.
That actually bothered. I think that comment so far has annoyed me the most.
Yeah. Those ones I think are the most hurtful because
completely diminishing of everything you do. It's
yes, and those are the ones like good for a girl, or like he almost lost to a girl, or he can't even beat a girl. First off, I'm fucking 35 years old. Sorry, I swore, but I'm 35. I am a woman. I'm not a girl, so please don't infantilize me like that. And they're not looking like they didn't watch the game. Like they just spent 40 minutes, if they even watched it, they spent 40 minutes just steaming about the fact that I am a woman instead of watching the game that we played. The game that we played that was the most fun that we had ever had. It was an entertaining game. It was a close game. It was a game where the lists were a little bit like weird. We got to show off like different units. Like there's so many other things that went on in this amazing battle report, but that's what they chose to focus on. It's not Tanya, it's woman.
Yeah. And I can't think of an actual like single scenario where bringing up your gender should have why, unless it's nice to see females being represented. That would have been like the only context. I think that should have even like what? Right. Why is that even a thing to discuss? I think
I see it if
fall back on like just hanging out with boys my whole life. Like, oh, you're good at that as for a girl. And it's just like it's weird.
Yeah.
I never saw myself as a girl hanging out with guys. I just saw myself hanging out with my friends. And so it's like the same.
Mhm.
It's like you're almost reminded, like, oh, that's right, I'm a female here. Like, what?
Right.
Like,
I mean,
not that you're trying to hide it. I mean, it's just like, why is that a thing? You're just a person playing a game.
I think that's what everybody wants to get to the point of, right? It's
right. Because it's not like, right. But like, I think it's the kind of comments I get, it's like, oh, well, you're good at using tools and stuff for a woman. I'm surprised as a woman, you know this. And I'm like, it'd be different. It's like, oh, as a beginner, you're doing this, whatever. It's like, why does gender have anything to do with that at all? You know, it's not like, oh, for advanced, you know, maybe you should brush up on these skills, or, you know, maybe try learning this. But like, to bring in the fact that because I'm a woman is totally irrelevant, you know. And you're like, and then they'll be like, I don't mean to offend you. And you're like, bro, I don't even care. It's like, you know, just going forward, you know, that's what does that have to do with anything, you know, kind of thing.
I feel for you because I am a pawnbroker, and a big part of my job is assessing, evaluating, and testing used tools and getting them ready for sale. And occasionally there will be men who won't even talk to me. They will ask to see my boss, who doesn't even work there anymore, and they'll be like, oh, I want to talk to a man about it. And then so I say, okay. And then my boss would come over, and he is the least handy nerd you've ever come across in your life. And he'll be like, okay, how can I help you? And then they'll start asking questions about tools and be like, oh, well, I'm going to go get her because she actually knows. Right?
So,
that's got to be gratifying.
Same thing. I worked somewhere, we built ponds.
Yeah, you're like, well.
Yeah, so like all sorts of plumbing stuff, right? And it's like I worked there for 6 years, trained a bunch of the men who worked there, and I would get asked by a customer, tell them everything, and the second they saw like a male coworker, they'd go ask them the same question. And it's like, are you serious? Like, clearly I knew what I spoke to you about what you asked me, and now they're telling you the same thing, but you're listening because it's coming from a male. Or we'd like do deliveries to people's homes of like concrete fountains. And myself and another woman were actually probably the strongest women that worked there in general. And so we would deliver them a lot, and we'd get there and people would often be like, wait, are you two are the ones who are going to pick up? Do you need help? And it's like, who do you think loaded it? Like, why would we be? The question was infuriating because it's just like, do I actually have to do this right now? Like why would that even occur? Why are you asking that? It's insane. So yeah, I mean, definitely, I think we all experience that in this like 2021, and you're still like not. It's weird you use a tool. Like what?
Right.
What?
I'm too weak and frail to do my job that I've done for 11 years.
Yeah, and I are not small women. Like, why would, you know, like I'm 5'9", like I'm not a little lady, like, it, you know, so I could understand if I was a tiny human and they were like, you're gonna lift that big thing, but like it just made no sense. It was because we were female, so whatever. Anyways,
exactly. I am actually built like a brick shithouse, so for people to think that I can't lift a miter saw is actually ridiculous. Like, look at me, I'm built for this.
And at that point you just get like, well, like so stubborn. You're like, I know I can't physically move this, but I will find a way just to prove it to you that I can do this.
Now I'm gonna, I'm gonna, you know, to like tie that back into like the conversation of D&D and all these things, is I feel like that's partially why I like D&D, is I get to escape and have none of that matter. Like none of this matters there, at least in the games that I get to play. I get to be whoever I want, and none of that is questioned. My gender only matters if I make it matter. You know, I play with people who are non-binary characters who like are just neutral all around, and like none of that matters, and it's so nice. It's just nice. I'm just badass with a bow. Like it doesn't matter who I am. I'm just good with my bow. You know? Like, yeah, I think that's the best thing about it.
So, you, in terms of Warhammer, and I'm not saying that this is going to be the end all be all or the right answer. So don't be afraid to just brainstorm a little bit. But what do you think the answer is? How do you think we get to the point where after army or after battle reports aren't full of spite and gnashing of teeth.
Sorry, guys, I have to answer this call. So sorry.
Yeah. I think that we're on the path. I think that having women that are actually on these battle reports, like these large battle report channels, I think that's going to help. I think the more and more that women are visible within Warhammer content, I think it's like a desensitization thing, right? Like you've got like a wild dog and you want to try and tame it. Well, you got to sort of like expose yourself to it like a little bit every day until it starts to like trust you. And I think with this like really vocal and angry minority, I think, and it is a small minority. I really, really want people to know that like 98% of comments that I get on battle reports are quite positive. But I think that either they learn to accept it, they learn that there's nothing to be scared of. There's their spot in the male dominance hierarchy is not going to change by having women in their hobby. Either that or they will just leave, right? And the other thing, that I've noticed that is happening even in the year, it's almost been a year, I think, since I did my first battle report till now, is that people are actually starting to like step into the comments. So like if I wake up and then there's a mean comment, normally there's somebody else who's already dealt with the issue, right? Mm-hmm. So like the funniest one was somebody was like, there's only one question, is she married? And then somebody was like, there's only one answer, you're creepy. And I just think I think that helps, right? Mm-hmm. So that these anonymous people, right, these anonymous people in the comment section are having other anonymous people come in and call them out on it, not in a hyper aggressive way, but like, you know, that one used humor in a very effective way. You know, like I think we can call people in instead of just straight up calling them out, because I think what Erin said is true, that like a lot of the people are probably good people, but they just, for one reason or another, either have no idea how to interact with the opposite sex, or maybe they just don't even realize that what they're saying is a little bit offensive. And I think the majority of people we can actually like teach to be better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think there's a little piece in there that we don't have to go off on, because this might be mildly, I don't know, not cool to say, but I think there is a little bit of social issue with okay, it's huge. Not everybody has the best social skills that play these games, and I don't know what the specific correlation is and why they're drawn to it, but I think that's a common thing that needs to be considered, that it's not an excuse for them, but it's like should be considered. All need to be taught social skills, whether it is from a child's age or as an adult, unfortunately. Like, so yeah, I think it's
gamers with poor social skills. That is like the definition of a gamer from the early 1980s.
I know, right? Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, to honestly, my idea of what a person who played D&D was a guy who's never had a girlfriend, who lives in his mom's basement, and that's so cliche and silly, but like that was honestly like that's kind of was the joke that existed, right? So, and I think maybe in that sense that kept women away and other people awake. So like it's only for them, like, you know. But
well, and maybe that was part of it too. Was like, you know, in the early 80s, late 70s, you know, there was not just the excuse me, not just the satanic panic thing going on, but you know, we were nerds, we were the untouchables, and a lot of girls don't want to be seen with those untouchables.
But nerds are cool now. That's the other thing that's shifted in our culture. Like being a nerd is cool now, and I think that's changed a lot of it. Why more people are just right, like. I think so anyway. Nerd culture is accepted more.
So I actually got a message from one of my best friends from high school. He stumbled across my Instagram account and he's like, no way. And I was like, what? And he's like, man, you're like doing really well. And this was like a year ago or whatever. He's like, you're doing really good with this Warhammer stuff. And I was like, oh, yeah, no, I'm really enjoying it. And he's like, oh, did you know that we all played back then? I was like, why didn't you tell me? Like, they played Warhammer Fantasy Battles, and I was like, why didn't you tell me? He's like, well, we thought that girls didn't like that stuff.
Yeah.
And I was like, we watched Lord of the Rings, and like you know, we played like Tony Hawk and stuff, and like, you thought I wouldn't be into this other nerdy stuff? Like, come on.
So that's part of it too. Like, it's not that it was like intentionally leaving people. Like, there was just this assumption that we weren't gonna like this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you saying too that like you know, with time, you know, you got to like get them used to the fact that there's women around. I think it's that's definitely it. But then also, the more women are there when new people join, that is just the norm now. Like, anybody who's new and walks in right now and sees a lot more women around, like, that's just how it is. It's normal. They're not going to resist it and fight it. It's like the old school attitude that has to just like change. So I think it is inevitably going to get better because of that. The more there are, the more,
Yeah, I know when I ran games at game stores, women frequently outnumbered the men at the table. So that was always interesting, you know. But we would, I mean, it's the popularity of gaming in general is just taken off, whether it's board game nights or, you know, and I think a lot more women would enjoy some elements of the wargaming if they gave it a chance. My wife, she had never been interested in competitive gaming, but she gave BattleTech a try and she really liked it. And now she'll play like Twilight Imperium or, you know, any number of other competitive games. And but she always insists that we ally, because otherwise it causes arguments in the house.
Yep. My husband and I play war games, and we get kind of salty with one another when we play 1 versus 1. So
Right.
Yeah.
Like, there's
So we
certain
don't ever
games that
play
are
against
banned
each other.
in my household because of the fights they cause.
like Monopoly, just
Like the Jumanji of my house.
That's funny.
So yeah, I think that's really cool. So I had one other question for you, Tanya. Something I've been thinking about. Do you think the vitriol has gotten worse since you've had much more of an online presence, or has it always been kind of steady?
I guess like I could be considered like a public figure for Warhammer in some ways. But when I first found the hobby, the only way, because I didn't have a local group, so the only way I could really share it with others would be to go into Facebook groups at the time and a little bit into online forums. It was like I guess the end times for online forums. And Facebook was awful back then in 2013 in Warhammer groups. It was really, really terrible. I straight up had people tell me I'd never be able to learn the game because I'm a woman and women just can't play tactically. And just like really rampant, blatant misogyny that nobody called out at all. And I was a nobody. I literally was just like, hey, I just found this game and I'm really excited about it. And like, that was what happened, right? And I don't see that anymore, right? Do I think that it's worse now that I'm a public figure? No, I think that it's better. And the women that I see coming in, while they do get like the odd like creeper and things like that, in general in their posts, with a few exceptions here and there, their public posts are not like a breeding ground for misogyny like they would have been in 2013. You will get the odd one here and there, but in general in 2013 I would say like 25% of your comments would have been misogynistic in nature.
That's promising though, right?
The culture is definitely shifting. I think it is a combination of women are deciding to take up space within the hobby and do it in the public sphere, and also I do think it is that like GW, Games Workshop, is starting to take baby steps to actually rectify the problem with the culture of their products.
That's interesting. So the last thing I really wanted to touch on is, and Ari already kind of dipped a toe in it, so maybe she could kick it off, but and that is outside of the actual gaming table, you guys paint miniatures. Ari, you make a wide array of products that you sell on Etsy.
Yeah.
How has that been with in regards to being a woman in that environment? And I know that on the miniature front, there are always people who are willing to tell you how it's done, regardless of your gender. But have you ever had any bad experiences?
I haven't really had any bad experiences. I mean, there's always going to be people who are never going to be happy with anything that you do. But generally, online with my Instagram, people are generally really supportive. Because I think it's just like, I don't deal with, if anyone's going to be, you know, sexist or anything, I'm just like, okay, I'm just not gonna deal with that, you know. But, oh my god, sorry, my dog is like clawing my leg so hard. But yeah, I haven't really experienced a lot of that kind of sexism. It's just more when I went into from crafting, which is like could be painting or whatever, to a more masculine kind of area, which would be the woodworking. You know, that's when I kind of got the oh, for a girl, you know, you're doing good, and you're like, wow, thank you, you know. And that's kind of the only time, is because that can, because otherwise painting and everything else would be considered crafting, and women craft. So oh my gosh.
Welcome to the show. What do we have here?
Never forget.
Oh my god, it's my chocolate lab. He's like, let me out of here. Oh god. I know, and I'm in a rolly chair, so I'm like, okay, I get it. Okay.
What about you two?
I haven't really personally had much negative, aside from the miniature with the exposed breasts at one time, and that wasn't really directed at me per se. Like, if that makes sense, it was just commenting on the miniature and not me, and it wasn't. And part of what bothered me is they weren't commenting on anything about it, the paint job or anything like that. But I suppose that's better than them saying something derogatory about it. But right. I do know it happens to other people, and I don't think it's gender specific either, like who gets the negative comments. I've definitely rallied to other people getting the comments, and like I'm quick to be somebody who's like, we don't like that here. Like, yeah, unwanted criticism is not acceptable. Like, if you really feel the need to say something private, DM them and ask them. Right, you know, that thing. But in general, not really. And I know that some people do more often, and I've actually pondered quite a bit why. Is it something about their presence that they're maybe putting out how do I say this? Like, you bullies feel like they can get at them or something, or like, you know, I don't know what exactly it is, but you know, I've gotten the occasional like, oh, you should do this, you know, but it doesn't ever feel, I don't know. So in general, I think I've been pretty lucky that I've not had a lot of that. Publicly anyways. DMs, men are men are always gonna be boys. Ooh, a girl in my hobby.
Yeah.
That's nice. That's the whole
I actually feel like with painting in the beginner, like the beginner sphere of painting, there's this sort of like sexist idea that women are just naturally good at it. I don't know if you've experienced this.
Women are always good at art. Yeah.
Like they're good at painting, artsy. Right?
Yeah.
Right. So
because men don't have any fine motor skills.
You know what though? That's not true. That's not true. But like,
art is at all gender. It has nothing to do with it. Like, it's part of, that's how your brain works. It's not part of that part of the brain. It's not.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I feel like I kind of took to miniature painting quite well, because one, I in my past I used to like draw and paint and things, but I also just like really, at the time that I started, I really enjoyed makeup. I mean, I say that as I like, but so like the idea of like contour and highlight and all of this, it was almost like miniature painting, but like on your face. It was like the exact same principles. So for me, that is why I feel like I sort of like got to an acceptable level rather quickly in miniature painting, but I don't think that that's a gender thing, right? Like a man who likes makeup as well, or even just like watches makeup tutorials or whatever, is going to have the same kind of experience potentially that I had. It does not anything like ingrained in like your meat suit, you know?
Right. It's like it's the point that you thoroughly enjoy it. And so you want to do it because you enjoy it and you want to get better for yourself and kind of progress from there for yourself and not for anyone else. And I think that's where a lot of people, like, it could be therapeutic for them to sit down, like, oh, I get to paint now and stuff like that. And it's like they don't necessarily do it for other people, but more for themselves.
So, like, for example, let's think about it like this. If there was a man who was really into automotive, like painting, right? That seems like a very masculine hobby. I like to paint cars. And he was really good at pinstriping. Chances are he's probably going to take to edge highlighting very well, right? It's going to have like that fine motor control, that steady hand, as well as know how to use the paint on the brush to like do a really nice edge highlight. It's probably going to be excellent at it rather quickly, but that's not a gender thing. That's just like his experience as a human being.
Yeah. And like understanding color theory has nothing to do with being a boy or girl. I mean,
I don't know any color theory.
You do, yeah. I mean, we can all look at it, is what I'm saying. It doesn't come naturally to one or the other.
I have an app for it.
Well, there you go. I mean, yeah, so I think nothing that has to do with the painting or the art side of it has anything to do with being.
You know, and the thing with Erin though, you really embraced models that show off the feminine form. You have the line of minis. I can't remember exactly what you call them, but they have something to do with booties.
Oh, Artisan Guild, all the pinups. Yeah, I'm known as very early on was kind of called the Queen of Booty, and I have never quite taken the title because but I take it in stride. I think it's funny. Yes, I paint a lot of female. You know why? Well, like Tanya just mentioning that she has a history of doing art. Same, like to go back to my like Frank Frazetta and the drawing that I all did. It's like I'm just naturally drawn to that. I never even liked drawing men. Like I couldn't, and I think a lot of it's because it's not my body. It's not what I look at. Not that those are my bodies either, but just I just appreciate the female form. I think there's a art from as long as we can. You know, human history art has always celebrated the female form. Like it is curvaceous and the lines and all of that, you know. So I'm not looking. I realize that people are going to look at it and sexualize it, but that's their issue. Like that's not what I'm doing. But at the same time, I kind of am taking ownership of that part of it as well too. And I think there's something to that too. Women like
feel like
having men paint those things. Like, no, I'm a chick. I'm a straight woman who's like super into this like gorgeous body. Like, you know, it doesn't have to be about anything beyond that. So.
I feel like it becomes an issue again when we were talking about how the women are like consistently portrayed. There is a brand of miniatures called Brother Vinny, and they are a lot of times like unnecessarily kind of like bare, and in a lot of times it's just like really inappropriate and sort of subject matter, right? So in that right, so like in that case, like I can't support that brand because there's obviously like something going on with that culture of that brand that seems a little like misogynistic to me. However, I am also a creature caster, creature creator, and they are also like the brand of butts and boobs, right? So like and the way that the models are sculpted in very like powerful kind of poses, or like the way they do like hag style women, it's like very varied, and I feel like it's like a healthier way of looking at the female form.
That's the thing. Yeah, I'm not drawn. There's some models, specifically like 3D prints, that are so uncomfortable. Like they make me uncomfortable. The poses that they put them in are like, it's like, why is this even a thing? Like, so I don't paint them. Like that's the thing. Like very, very small. That's marketed to a very small group, I feel like, and they're not represented very much. So yeah, and like she's saying that they may be naked and very voluptuous or whatever, but like they're still in like powerful like poses and really owning themselves in their poses, and they're not like, oh, don't hurt me, you know, like ever, like like women.
I've come across when I ran my last campaign with my last group, I was looking for some very specific miniatures because my wife, we were playing the Alien RPG, and one of the professions, if you will, is kid, like the Newt character, right? She was playing a kid. Now all I did was type in 28 millimeter child miniature, and some of the most horrific things came up, you know, on Etsy. Yeah, I can tell you, I know exactly what you mean. If you go on Etsy, you can find some crazy stuff. But so what does Erin have coming up? What's big coming up for Erin?
Oh my, nothing really specific, kind of the same as always. I just started the new competition that I run. Yeah, so today is like, we always launch on the 1st and end on the end of the month. So that, and
that's your dare? Tell people about the Dark Elf Dare.
This month's theme is forest, which I'm really excited about because forests are like my favorite place on earth. So and yeah, we keep our topics very, very broad, so it's like super up to interpretation. They're kind of, I think of them as like a writing prompt always. Like, here's a little thing, now run, you know, have fun. So that's happening, and then meanwhile we'll be closing the other one up, which means we do our live stream where we kind of showcase everything. And I really encourage people that aren't in the competition to come watch those, because they're a showcase of a bunch of people in our community who worked really hard on something, and it's just really cool to get to. I love doing those because it's all about them and showing off what they made, and you can tell how much they like it, and it's just cool if more people come see it. So I always try to encourage that.
And where's that live stream gonna be?
On my Twitch, actually.
How do we find that?
It's Dark Elf Girl, but it's dark_elf_girl on Twitch. Yeah. And then I think that's kind of the only main thing. I got lots of projects I'm working on all the time, and other live stream setup. Oh, that's the other thing. Myself and a couple others have started doing a live stream called Meet and Greet, to kind of welcome in more people into the community and sort of help people, you know, meet each other. And we're giving people the opportunity to hop on live with us for 5-10 minutes and talk a little bit about themselves and like just introduce more people. So we'll be doing our second one on the 11th. So I'm really looking forward to that. And that'll be on Instagram. Or the average stream I do on Instagram, because it just tends to, that's where the community is. Twitch has the benefits, as Tanya knows, like there's a lot more you can do with your Twitch stream, which is why I do the dare streams there. But for just your average chatting, I'm usually going to be found on Instagram.
What is your account name? Is that going to stream under your account name?
Yeah, probably, yeah. It's Dark Elf Erin, dark.elf.erin. It used to be girl, but that's a whole other.
That's a whole other story that we won't talk about.
No. Yeah, it's a newer account, but it's still me, same stuff, new account, slightly different name. That's about it. Yeah.
What do you got going on? What's new with Tanya? What's coming up? What's the big thing that we're all excited about?
I will be returning to play on tabletop at some point, probably before the end of this year, if not early next year. And that's a big one. That's a really big one. You don't want to miss it if you play Warhammer. And we'll be going to the Las Vegas Open. So that is one of the biggest Warhammer tournaments in the world. I will be playing the worst faction in the game right now, so we'll see how that goes. What else? As I just do like a ton of stuff, so if you are interested in talking about topics in wargaming, topics like culture crafting or bringing new people into Warhammer, or how to run a tournament, what do you need to know about joining the community, those are sort of the topics that I cover. So Be Nice Roll Dice is a talk show where I get movers and shakers in the Warhammer content creation community to come and talk to me about targeted topics within wargaming. I stream on my own Twitch channel on Saturdays, so that is twitch.tv/the_Warmistress. I stream with my friend Scary on his Twitch stream every Thursday and Friday, so that's twitch.tv/Scardcast.
There you go. I'm gonna be on there with them tomorrow. That's right.
That's right.
Sorry. I was like, oh yeah. Right.
And so that is like a hobby hangout. And I sometimes write articles for Goonhammer. So it's goonhammer.com. They actually do have Dungeons and Dragons articles, as well as all sorts of different games. So they cover like Star Wars Legion, Age of Sigmar, anything that you can think about for tabletop gaming. They have contributors for it. I'm sure I'm forgetting something, but I do a lot of stuff.
We'll put links to everything at the bottom of the video here, so people can find Erin and Tanya more easily that way. And I'll have you guys send me all that information so that I can just copy and paste. That way I don't have to mess anything up with my poor fine motor skills. Because I do have to type things usually 5 and 6 times before I get it right. But you know, it's part and parcel of being a guy. You got to put up with lots of grammatical errors. So, and we're very excited to have brought you our very first episode with 2 very dear friends, Erin and Tanya.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. I'm forgetting everything witty I've ever said in my life.
She's on the spot.
Okay. I know, right? I wasn't prepared for this.
Okay. You think about it. I'll give you guys something.
Mm-hmm.
If you like what we do here on the channel, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell, because it really helps us out.
Yeah, thanks. You know what's funny? Is that I was thinking to myself like 10 minutes ago, I should probably mention that. And then in virtually every video I've ever made, I've always forgotten to say that.
Well, there you go. I did it for you.
I'm going to have you on more often. You know what I might do is just take that clip and just run it at the very end of everything.
Do it.
Because that was perfect. That was much better than I could do.
I know. I can't duplicate that.
Yes, you can. We met earlier, and she was very, very charismatic when she was practicing our send-off line.
Oh my God.
With her little mug and everything. It was good. So
it's on the spot. It always is. Yeah.
It's always harder on the spot. It is.
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot the other thing that I do. I do a podcast. And I'm used to being put on the spot so I'm on a podcast with 3 of like the most accomplished players in Warhammer. And they'll always be like, so Tanya, what do you think? After they're talking about like minute meta-analysis. And I'll be like, you put me on the spot. Yeah. I don't have anything to add.
You know what the correct answer to that question is I think you nailed it right there, buddy.
Yeah. I think you said everything there's to say about it. I mean, well done.
No, I like to give them a hard time. I think that they have it coming sometimes.
Yes.
To some degree.
All right.
Well, thank you for having myself and Tanya on.
Oh, well, you know what? It was my pleasure. It was our pleasure.
Yeah, it's really cool.
It really is our pleasure. Because honestly, Tanya was one of the very first people I think I met on Instagram, where I actually talked to and engaged with for, on a friend level. So I mean, I think it's a testament to how good of a person she is. And Erin, I actually found you on the Explore panel.
Ooh,
I didn't know that.
I was like, oh, there's someone that's cool, and that miniature is really awesome. And I think I messaged you, and then the avalanche of talking back and forth just happened. Yeah. Right. And that's just how she is. So just that friendly. So.
Well, did you know that Erin and I are salty sisters?
Salty sisters.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't feel any salt today, that's for sure.
Oh, that's because we keep it in the group chat.
Yeah.
Away from you.
Time and place for salt. Time and
That's
place.
right.
Yeah. Maybe a tiny bit of salt, always tiny, but yeah.
Just for flavor, you know.
Oh, you
Flavor.
gotta have the salt for flavor. You gotta have that. You gotta have that tension.
Mhm.
So.
I'm kind of known in the Warhammer world as being like the sassy one. So I try really hard to like rein it in when I come do stuff like this. It's hard.
Next time, just let it go.
No.
It'll be entertaining. That's what I told Ari before. I was like, I wonder if I could get Tanya to yell at me on there. And I was like, I don't have it in me. I don't think.
I don't think I could ever yell at you, but I did drop an F-bomb. So
Yes,
you might
you
have
did.
to like or something
I don't
over
know
it.
that I did, which usually like I dropped like 30 in my own streams. I just want you to know that was all for you. Like I did, I really was like, come on, Erin, clean it up a little bit. I think I might have.
I tried real hard, but I was not successful.
Yeah, it's definitely hard to like, you're like, okay, trying to sound like a normal person and not just like cursing every word or whatever. So I'm like, okay, gotta try to be some sort of professional. So yeah, it's definitely, I'm like, okay, gotta think about the sentence and erase half the words in it. But yeah,
So
sentence enhancers.
My podcast, it's myself, and I would say that I have a filthy mouth, an Australian with a filthy mouth, and then two really nice Southern gentlemen.
Aw.
It's a weird dynamic. Yeah.
Wait,
Adam and I
have it down.
Adam and I try really hard to like really just be decent, and it's hard. It's hard.
I don't swear very often. I do drop F-bombs all the time, but it's fudge.
Aw.
That's so cute.
That's about as bad as I get typically. So I have to get really upset to really swear. So.
Gosh, no, to me it's just a normal, like it's just part of my.
It's also flavor.
It's flavor.
Yeah, it is. And
fudge is
and
good too, though. It's delicious.
Yeah, and it wasn't until my daughter started repeating every word I said that I was like, okay, I gotta somehow rein it in. But it is hilarious when she does. So I'm like, am I discouraging this? Maybe not as much as I should, because it is pretty funny. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. That was fucking awful. Like, but,
okay, so like my nieces, if it's in context, it's not at anybody, and it's inside their own house, it's good.
Yeah,
it's fine. Yeah,
that's how I feel. Yeah, too. It's like it's not at somebody or directed towards anything kind of that offensive to someone or whatever. It's like some days you just have fucking hard days. Like
it's true.
Yeah,
it's true.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Ari, are you ready?
Oh God. Okay. I'll throw something out there. Okay.
All right.
So thank you for joining us on another round. If you enjoyed this, make sure you click below, like, subscribe, or comment, or you can even comment on our Instagram of what you'd like to see next. But until next time,